We are very fortunate this morning in having with us Dr. Donald P. Kent, who is Director of the Office of Aging. Dr. Kent received his bachelor's degree from Pennsylvania Teachers College in Westchester, Pennsylvania, his master's degree from Temple University, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and his Doctor of Philosophy from the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Kent was a teacher, or maybe I should say is a teacher. He taught at the University of Pennsylvania, Temple University, and the University of Connecticut. He has spent, looking over the information I have on Dr. Kent, he has spent his life, I would say, working with this problem and working with the aged. He has studied, and he has worked with it, and he has written about it. Our topic, or his topic this morning, I should say, for the address is education and an aging population. At this time, I would like to give you Donald P. Kent, who is Director of the Office of Aging, United States Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. Dr. Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yankees and Rebels. I think it is an oversight that we did not sing Dixie, and so I have to do something to atone for that. Your chairman indicated that some of you were not present, some of the conferees, and evidently thought that this was not pertinent to them. As he said that, I was reminded of one of my favorite cartoons. And this appeared in the New Yorker a while back. Perhaps some of you saw it. Shows a picture here. When we come on the scene, there has been a lady who has been driving a car, and she has driven the way women are reputed to drive automobiles, and she has weaved down the street and has come up over a curb, and has gone across the lawn and has plowed into a tree and quite wrecked the car. Fortunately, the little lady is unhurt, and as we come upon the scene, she is stepping out of the automobile, and there is a minion of the law who is present, and he is furious at this bit of lousy driving. But the little lady driver says to him, "This is not my car. I don't have a license. I wash my hands of the whole matter." At the outset, I would like to suggest to you that what I'm talking about is not something about them and they, but about us. Because whatsoever we do for the aged, we do for ourselves. As a former teacher, I'm very much aware of the fact that no group receives more gratuitous advice than the classroom teacher. And I also was very keenly aware when I was a teacher the fact that advice that costs nothing is usually worth about the same amount. I also remember very vividly as a teacher that those who were farthest removed from the classroom seemed to know best what should be done in the classroom. In fact, I developed what was known in the school in which I taught as Kent's Law. And Kent's Law reads that knowledge, and I put this in quotation marks, knowledge of teaching varies in direct proportion to distance from the classroom. I long observed that teachers had many doubts about what they were doing. Principals who were somewhat removed were moderately certain. Superintendents who were pretty far removed were very certain. School board members were positive. And those who had no connection at all with the school were absolutely sure. Now, being somewhat removed from the classroom now qualifies me freely to give you advice. However, I'm going to do so with just a little hesitation. And this is not because of these prior observations I've made about advice, but for fear of being somewhat misunderstood. Let me say, these feelings about being misunderstood and the apprehension it's created was somewhat reinforced by looking at some correspondence that exists in the files of the government seems that not too long ago there was a plumber, one Anthony Sirachi by name, who had made a discovery, or at least he thought he had, and that is that by pouring hydrochloric acid down a drain, he could unstop it. And so he communicated this information to us bureaucrats in Washington. And he received a letter that went something like this. Dear Mr. Sirachi, this is to acknowledge yours of the 16th. There is no question about the fact that hydrochloric acid is an efficacious solvent. However, it leaves a residue that is incompatible with metallic permanence. Well, we got a letter back from Mr. Sirachi, and he said that he was glad we agreed with him. So the second letter that went out to Mr. Sirachi read like this. Dear Mr. Sirachi, we fear that you have misunderstood the tenor of our former communication. We were trying to say that persistent use of strong acetic substances has a corrosive effect. Well, again, we got a reply from Mr. Sirachi saying he was glad we liked his idea. There is a third letter in the file, and this did get the point across. The letter reads very simply, Dear Tony, don't use acid. It eats hell out of pipes. Now, my fear of being misunderstood this morning stems partly from the fact that the topic is complex. And like most complex topics, it's an important one. In fact, I'm not going to be able to give you very glib and pat answers. In fact, the theme I could take today almost could stem from a statement by George Goebel, who once said that if you are cool and calm and collected, when everybody about you is losing his head, it probably means that you don't understand what's going on. And I would say to you that if you are very cool and calm and you have very glib and pat answers, if you have very glib and pat answers to the complex problems that our older people face, you just don't realize what is involved here. But I'm also somewhat apprehensive about being misunderstood because the points that I'm going to try to make with you this morning are fairly subtle ones. The suggestions I'm going to make are subtle ones. I'm not going to suggest new units in the classroom or new classes, but something of a very different order, a very different kind of approach. And because of this, I am going to use a somewhat circuitous approach. And I'm going to approach my topic in a variety of ways here and try to make these points that I would like to. My topic has been education and an aging population. Now, the last part of the topic I can dispose of fairly quickly. We do have an aging population. I think nearly all of us are aware of it at this time. I think, however, more attention has been given to the explosion of children, the population explosion at one end, than to the fact that we have also had a population explosion at the other end of the line among our older people. For example, in 1900, in all United States, there were slightly more than 3 million people who had passed their 65th birthday. Today, there are almost 18 million of our citizens who are over 65. Each year sees a net addition to these ranks of over 400,000. By the end of this decade, there will be some 20 million people who are past the age of 65, and within another decade and a half, we will have a population between 26 and 30 million people who are over 65. But this group is important not only because of the size of the group, but because of the fact that this is a neglected segment of our population. This is a segment of our population that has not shared equally in the prosperity of the past few decades. This is a segment of the population that has received less attention, that has received less benefits from the society than probably any other segment in our society. We do have an aging population. Now, what is the role of the school? Should it have a role? Recently, an article in your NEA journal, probably many of you saw it, suggested that the school should become the ally of older people and seek to work with older people in order to gain support from older people. It approached it on a purely pragmatic grounds. It made the point that in community after community, school boards are going for bond issues for new schools and things that the schools need. And to get this passed, you need the votes of older people. And to obtain the votes of older people, the school is going to have to do something for older people. This is not the approach that I would like to use with you this morning. I'm going to try to develop some reasons why the school should play a part in education for aging, why the school should have an interest in our older population, quite apart from such pragmatic reasons. I'm not sure that they are valid either. I could put very simply what I'm going to try to say to you, develop it. I'm going to try to make the point that all problems that we face are fundamentally moral problems. And the problem of aging in America is fundamentally a moral problem. And as such, all moral problems are really in the realm of the intellect. And the realm of the intellect is the domain of the school. And you cannot abdicate the role of the intellect. You cannot abdicate moral issues and responsibility for them. Now, let me go back here and try to develop my thoughts with you. What is the role of the school? Let me say that I'm aware that the school is already playing an important role. The role that the school has played with regard to our aging population, or I should say the roles, are diverse. They are many. For example, some school districts have made their facilities available to older people in the community. In hours when they are not being used for the education of young people, the classroom facilities have been open to the general community. There are schools that have made the gymnasiums available. There are schools that have made auditoriums available, that have made classrooms available for meeting space. Many other schools, through their adult education programs, have offered a variety of courses that are designed to appeal to the retired person and to older people. And they offer them at convenient hours. Frequently, I've heard adult educators say to me, "You talk about offering courses for older people. We have offered them, but we get very little response." I will say, "Well, what hours did you offer them?" And they will offer them late in the evening. And actually, you have to gear it. If the course was offered from 3:30 to 4:30 or 4:30 to 5:30, it makes all the difference in the world as far as getting older people to participate. Some schools have recognized that through their adult education courses, they can do much to prepare people for retirement. And there are retirement preparation courses that are offered in the community. Retirement preparation courses that are offered for companies, for unions, for civic groups. Other schools have recognized that we are developing a whole host of professional and quasi-professional fields where people are working with older people. Housing managers, activity center directors, nursing home managers. And these people need training. And many school districts have opened their adult education courses and have designed courses such as they have in Cleveland for nursing home managers and in the city of Los Angeles for housing managers and for nursing home directors. Some school districts, notably Winnetka, have been using retired people in the classroom, using them as teacher aides, calling upon retired people who have training and experience to come in and assist the teacher. This is a way in which the teacher's efforts can be magnified and she can have 2 or 3 assistants to help her. Other schools have even incorporated materials about aging into the curriculum. At present, the Office of Aging is working with one state in developing a specific unit in social studies for the secondary schools on the nature of the aging process and problems of aging, and we are hopeful that this will be available this fall, and we are optimistic that there are perhaps 2 states that will incorporate this into the curriculum. Now, all of these are important activities. All of these are desirable. But I would like to pose a somewhat difficult and different task for you. I would like to plead, and I use the word advisedly, with each of you, with every classroom teacher, to do something within the classroom with regard to this problem of aging that has nothing to do with special units, that has nothing to do with opening facilities, and the kind of things that I mentioned before. What I'm now going to ask you to do involves changing thought patterns, changing an image that is held of aging. It's more difficult because it is less specific. It's more difficult because it is more basic. Now let me explain. Older people have many problems. We could enumerate them. They have a problem of how do you use free time? And the amount of free time that an older person has is very great. For example, if you retire at 65, you have an average life expectancy of 14 to 15 years. And just figure out how much free time is involved here. There are 24 hours in a day. How many hours are consumed with eating and sleeping? Perhaps 14? This leaves 10 hours a day to occupy. Multiply 10 hours a day by 365 days in a year, and you get 3,650 hours. And you multiply this by the 14 years of life expectancy, and you get 51,003 hours. Here is a block of time of 51,000 hours of time to occupy. This, incidentally, is a block of time that is over half of the actual time that you spend at work when you are gainfully employed. Now, this is a lot of time to occupy, and this is something that becomes a problem for many people. Another problem that many older people have is just the shock of adjusting from a life of employment and occupation to one of retirement. Many older people find great difficulty in finding a meaningful use of their leisure, doing something that carries with it meaning. All of us do not want just to occupy time, but we want to do something that gives us satisfaction, that we feel that we are making a contribution, that we feel that is important. And so there's the problem of a meaningful use of time. There are, of course, very basic problems of income. When I talked to you a few minutes ago and said this is a neglected segment of the population, they have not shared equally in our prosperity, this can be documented. Most of us who are gainfully employed do not fully realize how small the incomes of our retired people are. In fact, very few people realize before they retire what their retirement income is going to be. In giving retirement preparation courses, I used to ask people about to retire to compute what their retirement income would be. And I have yet to find a person that did not overestimate what his income in retirement was going to be. When you stop working, your income is cut. And it remains somewhat stationary. And as the cost of living rises, your retirement income actually decreases. We do know, for example, that in America, over half of the people who are past the age of 65, over half of the couples where the head of the family is over 65, over half of these people have incomes of less than $2,500 a year. And for the aged single person, the aged widow living alone, the picture is even more grim. Over half of these people have incomes of less than $1,000 a year. So they do have problems of income. They have problems of health. And they have problems of housing. But it's to none of these that I'm going to ask you to direct your attention this morning. And while I think the school can make contributions towards each of these problems that I have just enumerated, I think there is still a more basic problem to which you can make a more fundamental contribution. I think there's a basic problem which underlies all of these, and from which many of the others stem. It's briefly this. The aged in America live in a society that is in many respects hostile to aging. The aging in America live in a society that really has no place for them. The aging in America live in a society where the viewpoint is widely held that aging in itself is bad, you're over the hill, you reach the end, that age is all decrement, that age is a period of just of physical and psychological declines. They live in a society where the view is held that most older people are physically feeble and psychologically verging on senility. They live in a society where old people are patronized, tolerated, and hopefully put off where they won't interfere with the important work of productive younger people. In short, the aged in America live in a youth-centered society. Now, there are many reasons for this, and for our youth-centeredness and our orientation and understanding of youth. It's partly because of the fact that there are relatively few articulate older people. In fact, as you get older, you become less inclined to battle, and more reflective and contemplative, and you accept some of these things. And the second thing is that those who are not yet old have difficulty in understanding what it means to be old. You will recall in Harper Lee's beautiful novel, To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus Finch makes the statement that no one ever understands another person till you get inside of his skin and walk around. And let me say that one of the problems that older people have is that those of us who are younger have difficulty in getting inside their skin and walking around. Let me give you an illustration. A few days ago, a neighbor boy did some very foolish things that were very destructive and very irritating to me. But how did I react to them? My reaction was, while I was irritated as all hell at first with the lad, and as you gather, I'm fairly profane, and the neighborhood was blue for a while, I very soon took the viewpoint, well, long about the turn of the century, I was a boy too. I was a boy once, and I remember doing very foolish things too. And I had a certain understanding of the boy because I too had been a boy. And then not long after that, an elderly neighbor did something that irritated me, and I wondered at the same time, would I have the same understanding for him that I had of the boy were I 75 too? And so this is one of the reasons why you and I haven't walked around in the skin, and as a society, we have difficulty in understanding what it means to be old. But I think there's something even more basic than that is involved here. I think the chief reason for our attitudes towards older people lies in our culture, that we have a youth-centered culture. Now, I'm talking here about something that's fairly subtle. I'm not referring alone to the fact, though this is true and partly a reflection of our youth-centeredness. We do know that our music is geared to the taste of teenagers, and what you and I are going to listen to on radio is what the teenagers like to listen to, and that cars and automobiles are designed to appeal to teenagers and young people, and that clothing is designed on this. Even our mortgage payments, let me say, have been designed entirely for the young marrieds, having an equal payment system over a long period means that you have very low payments at the beginning of purchase a house. And this is designed to encourage young marrieds. You can put that in quotes. This is another term, whatever the hell young marrieds are. This is designed to help the young marrieds. The houses are built to suit the young married. But this is only part of what I'm talking about here. There's still something more basic than that. And I'm referring here to a way of looking at life, to a viewpoint. See, when you look at situations, there is not one way of looking at situations, but there are many ways of looking at situations. And the way that we look at a situation in our society tends to be from the vantage point of the young. Let me give you a series of items. A month ago, I was, as a federal bureaucrat, represent the government at a variety of conferences. I was representing us at a conference on employment. And the pitch was made how there are a great many younger people out of work, and this is true. And I made the pitch how many older people were out of work, which is also true. And as the conference went along, two things became clear. One, the conferees by and large were agreed that older people should have jobs, providing it didn't take jobs away from younger people. And secondly, many people suggested one way to make jobs for younger people was to get some of the older people out of the labor force to make room for these younger people coming in. So I raised a demur and said, why do this? And they said, well, younger people are just getting started in life. And I said, yes, but older people want to continue in life. And they said, yes, but young people need jobs. They want to get married and establish homes. And I said, yes, but older people are married and they want to keep their marriage and they want to keep their homes. And they said, yes, but older people could go on Social Security. And I said, well, younger people could go on public assistance. And they said, you don't understand. Now, you will miss my point entirely here if you think that I was arguing against giving younger people jobs. This is not it at all. In fact, as in so many instances of the problems that we face, the answer lies not in pitting one group in society against another group in society. And we should avoid always falling into the trap of pitting one group against another group. And frequently there are those who would like to do this so that neither group gets anything. The answer in terms of employment has to be that we have to have more jobs, period. We have to have jobs for younger people and jobs for older people too. But the point that I'm trying to make here is this, that in this whole discussion, the situation was viewed from the vantage point of the young. People had a great sympathy for understanding of the young person graduating and needing a job, but they had great difficulty in putting themselves in the place of the older man, the older woman, who also wanted a job. Another item. Over the past weekend, I was at Ocean City, New Jersey, lying on the beach, and I was with a group of teenagers. Sometimes teenagers like senior citizens around, too. Whether they like them or not, we are around. And they were talking about automobiles. I'm beginning to think that teenagers can talk about only three things: automobiles, the opposite sex, and parties. But they were talking about automobiles, and I said, why is it that you teenagers have so many accidents? And as you know, the accident rate for teenagers is enormously high. The driving rate, accident rate, is several times that of any other group. There was unanimity. It's due to the fact that there are so many other slow, poor, older drivers on the road. In fact, the suggestion was made, let's get older people off the roads. They're too slow. In fact, they said, and I was surprised, some of the middle-aged there quite agreed. They say you're coming down a turnpike, and you're going 60 or 70 miles an hour, and you come over the crest of a hill, and here's some old man, and he's going along at 40, and you smash into him, and it's your fault. I said, isn't it? They said, no, he shouldn't be there. There is a view, in fact, some states, this is not as far-fetched as it might sound. There are states that have had this proposed in terms of taking older people off the roads. Implicit here, and let me again make the point. You will miss my point if you think I'm trying to defend any kind of poor driving. Not at all. I am quite in sympathy with taking off the road any poor driver, providing you do it on this basis. You take off the road poor drivers regardless of age. I am completely opposed to taking off poor drivers of a specific age group. And the problem that you face here in terms of any kind of poor driving is that while there are poor drivers at 80 and 85, there are also poor drivers at 40 and 45 and poor drivers at 18 and 19. And it's the discrimination that would bother me here. But the viewpoint that bothered me here, the important point that I'm trying to get across to you, is again this vantage point in which it was viewed from the fact that the roads belong to those who want to go fast. The roads belong to the young, to the alert, and to the quick. And somehow or other, those who are young and alert and quick and who are speeding to the beach have a right to the roads, but those who are old and want to go slowly to the grocery store should not be on the roads. I could go on with items. Let me add just one more of several, or as the poor Latin student says, tempus fidgets. Where I live is a suburban community, and we say we live there for the children. It's what everyone says. And it is a fairly open kind of community in which there are no fences, in which the kids roam up and down, and there are kids galore, and there are tricycles everywhere and bicycles everywhere. The community is a mess. The kids have made a complete mess of the place. And despite the fact that we have a big playground nearby, well, that's a mess too. But in this midst of this, there is an older couple that lived. They've lived here for a long time. They lived here before this community grew up around them. And they have a high hedge around their property. And their property is somewhat overgrown. The good people in our community were somewhat exercised by this, and they went to the old couple and suggested, why don't we have this cut down so that this complete openness can prevail? Then our children can run from one end of this to the other without having to go around. The older people said no. And you know, this community feels that this old couple is very crotchety, disagreeable. They can't understand why they're spoiling this beautiful community so that the children could have all of this runway. Again, the point here is they can understand very well how nice it would be for the children, but they have very little sympathy for the fact that the older people may like privacy, that the older people would like to have the yard that they want it. Let me make my point in a conceptual rather than a concrete way. Psychologists and sociologists speak of reference points, of centrisms, which color and determine our views. Each one of us frequently views a situation from a centric point. We have, for example, the egocentric person. And the egocentric person is one, of course, who views everything from society from the viewpoint of I. He puts himself in the center and views the whole world from this narrow vantage point. And then there are people whom we speak of as being ethnocentric. And they don't put themselves in the point of I, but they put their own particular group. And they view the world not from the viewpoint of I, but from the viewpoint of their own particular society. They say we. In fact, it's egocentrism writ larger, really. In fact, if I were to say to you, I am intelligent, I am brilliant, I am this, that, and the other thing, you would say, what a conceited person. But if I say we Americans are intelligent, we Americans are vigorous, dynamic, we Americans have it, you say the first sensible thing you said all morning. In one, it is placing yourself at the center. In the other, it is placing the group at the center. This becomes an ethnocentrism. And what I am suggesting to you here today is that we have a pedocentric culture. We have a youth-centered culture in which we view things from the centrism, from the reference point of young people. Now, the danger, as sociologists point out, of any centrism is that there distorts the view. Any centrism inevitably distorts your viewpoint. It narrows the scope of interest. It leads to a lack of objectivity, and it also can lead to great unfairness. It can lead to great callousness because of the fact that individuals who are egocentric, as you know, can walk over other individuals in good conscience because they say, but it was for me. And the ethnocentric person can do dastardly things to other groups going on the implicit assumption, but my group is at the center. We have a right to it. And this is my point that has happened, given the centrism of youth, that we can neglect older people, we can ignore them, treat them unfairly, put them aside because of this view. Now, let me make clear, I am not arguing that we should have a gerontocentric society. My point is that any kind of a centric view would be unfair, and a gerontocentric society, one that was completely oriented to old people, would be equally bad. My themes that I have been trying to develop have been these. First, we have to break through our youth-centeredness to a wider view. We have to understand the aged and the changes that come with age. And with this understanding, there will come certain changed attitudes. We will begin to recognize, when we begin to break through our youth-centeredness and look at older people, we will recognize that, as the poet says, old age is opportunity no less than youth, though in a different dress. For as the shades of evening fade away, one sees the stars invisible by day. And we will recognize that age is not all decrement. We will begin to realize that the great trustees of our society, our great judges, the great philanthropists, those who have the broadest view, are the aged. We will begin to recognize, in terms of the contributions, the fact of an Adenauer, a Churchill, Michelangelo in the 9th decade of life, designing the chapel, Rembrandt, Titian. But these are not, you would say, are these not these exceptions? Let me say to you that when you work with older people, you begin to realize that these are not exceptions. There are countless numbers of individuals who have greater strength of character, greater wisdom in the later years of life than at any other time. In fact, one of the nice things about living is that one never knows when the best years of life are going to be. If you're a pessimist, you can put it the other way. You never know when the worst are going to be either. But if you have contact at all with older people, there are countless numbers of older people whose best years are in the 8th and 9th decades of life. We would begin with this change of trying to understand. There would be a change of attitude to recognize that old people are not all feeble, they're not senile, they're not without capacities. We need to break through this youth-centeredness to have a richer society, in short. The second theme that I've been trying to make is this. The school is the instrument in our society that can do this. Not by specific courses, specific units, but in all teaching, in courses in literature, and hygiene, and social studies, and science. The attitude that you and I reflect in the classroom, the viewpoints, just as we have the obligation to get the child from the outside of himself to see things not from an egocentric, but from a broader viewpoint, and to get him outside of his culture, not to be ethnocentric, but to see things in a broader frame of reference. So we have the obligation to take them beyond the confines of a youth-centeredness, too. And third, in doing this, the school will be doing several things. It will, in the first place, be helping older people who are today disadvantaged. And let me say that, again, the point I'm making here is that we should help older people, not because we're going to be kind to unfortunates. We have to give them the opportunity because every individual, regardless of age, has a right to be treated decently and to have opportunities. In doing this, the school will be doing something else. We will be helping ourselves. For as I began, what we do for the aged, we do for ourselves tomorrow. But most important of all, it is in keeping with the fundamental mission of the school. It is intellectually honest. So long as we present and foster a view that is one-sided, we are doing the pupils in our society a disservice. And we are not being true to the overall objective of education, which is developing minds that are free. And one cannot have a free mind if he cannot break through his centrism. And fourth, and most important of all, I come to where I began. I think there is a moral issue that is involved here. In the long run, I think you judge a society by two things: how well it treats the stranger, and how well it treats those who are least able to take care of themselves. You judge a society not by what it gives to those who can take, but what it gives to those who are most disadvantaged. And in a large measure, how we treat the aged will be a measure of our society. In fact, this was put, I think, most eloquently by the President himself, who not long ago in a message to Congress said this: we should judge ourselves as we will be judged in the eyes of others, not only by what we do in outer space, but by what we do here and now for our senior citizens.